Hello and welcome to our Lakeside chat. We are David Wofford and Katie Noonan, co-chairs of the Rotary Nature Center Friends. And we're so happy that you can join us tonight.
As we begin our program tonight, it's important for us to acknowledge that we are on stolen land, that Lake Merritt is part of Ohlone territory. We hear now from Karina Gould, spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn and co-founder of Segura-Te Land Trust.
Good afternoon, relatives. My name is Karina Gould. I am the spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn. We are here today at what most folks think of as Lake Merritt. We are in the territory of Huchin. Huchin is actually a territory that encompasses 6 Bay Area cities: Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, Emeryville, Albany, and Piedmont. And so this is a place that my ancestors have been since the beginning of time. And this was a place of abundance. I'm so happy that people from all walks of life that now come into our territory can enjoy this beautiful place that my ancestors have enjoyed since the beginning of time. My relationship to the land that I have been born to, raising my children and grandchildren here, has been to tell the story, the truth of what happened on this land before other people came here. I'm hoping that as we begin to learn these lessons of fires in California, the pandemic that's happening, that human beings come back to living in reciprocity with the earth.
Thank you, Karina, for your inspiring message. Hopefully we will be moving in that direction. I want to thank Karina for joining us tonight. And now we are going to focus tonight, and we're going to get right into our program in just a moment. I would like to make a quick reminder, hopefully to people, yes, who are just joining us, that we are Rotary Nature Center Friends, an independent nonprofit working in Oakland since 2021. We're a 501c3, and we engage all the community in real science and stewardship activities. We do that through focusing on community science and environmental justice, giving everyone a chance to learn and to work towards a healthier environment in our community. Briefly, I would like to thank our supporters. We've had many people supporting our work in the past year, and we are very grateful to them for their support. So now we are about to hear from Eli Kersh, the CEO of LakeTech, and he has been a citizen of the Bay Area and grew up in Oakland, basically around Lake Merritt, and has many. So he is a certified lake manager from the North American Lake Management Society, where he served as director for Region 9. He has had amazing background, receiving degrees in fire science and working as a volunteer firefighter. He's became competent and earned an undergraduate degree in geographic information science, and was a GIS analyst for fire and police departments and tribal governments. And he returned for a master's with an emphasis on lake management, and completed his thesis on problems like are faced in the lakes that are here in Oakland, both Lake Merritt, Temescal, and other lakes. So Eli, I want to welcome you. If I left anything out of your background, please feel free to tell us about it. We're so pleased that you're here tonight to tell us about the increased the interest and all of the wonderful work that you have done to improve our understanding of the lake.
Fabulous. Hey everybody. So I think I've done 3 Lakeside chats.
Yes.
And Ben has done a Lakeside chat, so there may be some repetition here. I love presenting. It's one of my favorite things to do. So aeration is a general term we use to talk about technologies and equipment that can be used to increase oxygen in the water. There are really three different types of equipment or categories of equipment do that. The three ways are artificially mixing or circulating the equipment, so circulating the water, typically vertically, but not necessarily, can be horizontally. That is a type of aeration. When most people think of aeration, they think about this second one and some sort of process where there's contact with air and water. And generally, this is done when people think of fountains or bubblers that bubble up like in a fish tank, with air bubbles coming into contact with the water or droplets of water coming into contact with the air. That is a process where we call it gas flux or gas exchange, is another way people talk about it, with basically oxygen molecules in the water and the air trying to reach equilibrium. And that happens with really all gases in the water as they come into contact with the atmosphere. There's also a much more sophisticated way of doing it, and we often call that hypolimnetic aeration or side stream oxygenation, supersaturation. These are some of the fancy terms that are used to describe some of these more advanced technologies. We did play around with these in Lake Merritt as well. They're very effective, but they tend to be much more expensive. And those are systems where instead of letting nature do the work for you, you're artificially finding ways to force a gas to dissolve into the water. And that can be done in a number of ways. And there are basic laws of physics that guide the design of those systems, having to do with water temperature, pressure, density, where you can use these laws of physics, these properties of an environment, to force oxygen or any gas for that matter to dissolve into the water. Think of carbonated sodas, soda streams, seltzer bottles. It's that same process. We're forcing, using pressure and temperature, to dissolve gases into water. If you do it wrong, you'll turn your lake into soda, which we've seen that happen as well, even at Lake Merritt. In talking about the three different ways to aerate or oxygenate a lake, we first should really ask ourselves, why? What's the purpose? Everybody knows oxygen is important for fish. Animals breathe it. But it also does a lot of other things in the environment. Oxygen is an oxidizer. Oxygen is present around us in the atmosphere, of course, and we breathe it. But oxygen also plays an important role in a lot of processes, chemical processes. Oxygen is the primary driver of rusting of things, right? Reduction and oxidation of molecules and elements, pollutants, metals, many things, all things react with oxygen at varying degrees. So oxygen is obviously very important for aquatic life, but oxygen also plays a really important role, kind of like a cleaning agent. I feel like that might sound a little bit like a buzzword, but oxygen provides a lot of other benefits in an environment. If you were to take all of the organisms in any lake and sort them into buckets, you would have a bucket of fish and you'd have a bucket of algae and weeds and kelp, crabs and critters and mollusks. But you'd also have a lot of microscopic organisms. Probably your largest bucket is going to be microorganisms. They are really fundamental to the health of a lake. If you don't have healthy microorganisms doing the decomposition and the breaking down of dying plant material and algae and dying organisms and recycling those minerals and nutrients back into the food web, you're going to have a stinky and very unhealthy lake. And you're not going to have a healthy food web. You need those decomposers, and those decomposers require oxygen. And in a lot of situations, if you deprive them of oxygen, they start doing some very unpleasant things. They create hydrogen sulfide gas in some situations, which can be toxic to fish. They can do something called methylating mercury in extreme situations where mercury in and of itself is not necessarily dangerous, but in certain environments, when it becomes methylated, which is a bacterial process, it becomes very toxic. And that's what we see all those signs posting about methyl mercury in fish, making it unsafe to eat. So oxygen is key, not just to healthy fish, but for healthy environments as a whole. So that is really why, one of the main reasons, we focus on aeration and oxygenation. Choosing which type of aeration or oxygenation can be a complicated process. Very deep lakes are different, of course, from very shallow lakes. Very small lakes are different from very big lakes, and everywhere in between. We've been asked recently to help out with Lake Elizabeth in Fremont. That's a little more, it's about 2/3 the size of Lake Merritt. And the entire lake is 4 feet deep. Lake Merritt is 144 acres, correct? Somebody correct me on that. That's right. Katie, 144, right? Are you guys there?
Hey, Eli.
Thought I might be alone for a minute. That would have been disappointing. Well, anybody? 144 acres? Assume you're there.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't notice I was unmuted. I was muted. So, yeah.
My screen has decided to hide everybody, but I'm just gonna go ahead and assume everyone's there.
We can
144.
see you.
Okay. Good. So,
it kind of depends
Lake
on the
Merritt
tides,
is
right?
very unique, of course, as because Lake Merritt is tidally influenced. It's salt water most of the year and brackish the rest of the year. And sometimes that's regular, changing with the tides. Sometimes it's muted when the tide gates are closed. So there's lots of factors you have to take into consideration when trying to choose which one of these aeration systems is going to be the most effective, as well as cost effective. And that can involve not just the capital expense of buying or installing the equipment, but also maintaining, repairing the equipment, monitoring the equipment. So all of those factors need to be taken into consideration. Ultimately, the whole point of aerating a lake is to some desired end, and it's usually not oxygen in and of itself. It's usually understanding that we want to make sure we have a healthy lake or suitable fish habitat or both. It may have, in some situations, be a means to reduce odors, reduce algae, So there's lots of factors to consider there. So it's important to also understand some lake fundamentals and how oxygenation and aeration affect these. The first one is eutrophication, and I often joke around that if that's the only word you know about lake management, eutrophication, then you know as much as I do, and you can go get a job as a lake manager. Ultimately, eutrophication is an unavoidable process. Basically it basically means the accumulation of nutrients in a water body. Nutrients come in various ways over time, and they generally don't leave. They come in from pollen, dust, dirt, runoff. They're also internally recycled in the mud. And so they build up over time, and we as scientists study how that buildup occurs over time, and we can classify lakes based on that. And a big part of nutrient dynamics in lakes is affected by the presence or lack thereof of oxygen. So if we want to have a healthy lake, we have to understand eutrophication. And a lot of times we simplify the concept of eutrophication by referring to it as like a lake's aging process. Generally, the older a lake is, the more nutrients are present. And so if we need to oxygenate a lake, what we're really trying to do is slow down and maybe even reverse an aging process. Couple factors, fundamental principles of lakes that are important when we think about using oxygen or aeration to do this is understanding stratification in lakes. Now, I've written here thermal stratification, but there's also other types of stratification. Salt water is denser than fresh water, so that also creates stratification. There are other factors that can cause stratification in different types of lakes. Different chemistries of lakes water can cause stratification, very deep waters. But generally understanding that when lakes stratify, they form very dense, they form layers based on the density of the water. And that could be because of these various factors. Temperature and salinity are the things for us to be thinking about with regards to Oakland. And so understanding when those layers form, do they help or hurt the lake? In a lot of lakes I manage throughout California and across the country, we see stratification forming in shallower, smaller lakes temporarily, and then mixing with wind events or rain, changes in temperature. And these small lakes, such as Lake Temescal, for example, here in Oakland also, that lake stratifies and mixes sometimes every day. And that can sometimes cause a lot of problems in a lake like that, because when lakes stratify, you often see changes in oxygen. I mentioned there's tons of microbes living down in the bottom of lakes, generally in the mud, and they are a huge demand of oxygen in a lake. So when lakes stratify, generally you see the oxygen in the bottom layer go to zero or go very low. When that happens, you get some of those negative consequences I mentioned before: methylation of mercury, generation of hydrogen sulfide gas. There's also lots of nutrient release that occurs in anoxic sediments, which is sediments with no oxygen. And in shallow lakes that mix frequently, that can result in kind of pumping and mixing up lots of things that you don't want. But I've also seen quite often in bigger, deeper lakes where it goes completely anoxic, no oxygen in the bottom of the lake, but it really doesn't harm the lake. In fact, most big lakes that I go to have no oxygen at the bottom. but they stay stratified, maybe all summer long, all the way into November, in some cases. And when they mix, there can be a little bit of unpleasantry in some situations. Sometimes it's really bad, but sometimes nothing at all happens. So understanding a lack of oxygen is great, but it's not necessarily going to be catastrophic or bad. And understanding these factors like eutrophication, stratification, and the size and the characteristics of your lakes helps you decide the magnitude of the problem. Is the low oxygen bad? How bad? And then understanding which technology is the best fit to solve that problem based on the need. There are really some basics to the first type of aeration, which is artificial circulation. A lot of people see this picture here on the left-hand side of your screen, and they see the bubblers like you have in a fish tank. Now, in a fish tank, the objective is actually to get gas transfer with those bubbles. It's not to mix the lake. Fish tanks don't generally stratify, right? But you have large bubbles. There's a lot of surface area where the bubble is coming in contact with the water, and there's some gas transfer that occurs in that situation. Surprisingly, though, the smaller the bubble, the higher the surface area of contact where the bubble is touching the water. So smaller bubbles are actually much better at diffusing gas in water than larger bubbles. But that said, it is a fact that only about 1 to 3% of a bubble will dissolve in water per foot of rise through the water. It's very limited. It's not very efficient. The way those systems are generally designed in lakes and in the natural environment is, as you see here on the left, it's kind of creating like a convection current, if you will. At least that's what it looks like. And it's mixing, it's drawing up and entraining water as those bubbles come up, lifting bottom water to the top, where that water now comes into contact with the atmosphere. Yes, there is some transfer occurring with the bubbles as that water's rising, but most of the benefit here is twofold. One, it is to make sure that water at the bottom that might be low in oxygen is able to come in contact with the atmosphere where the gas can exchange. But it's also really, most importantly, I would argue, about preventing stratification and density gradients. That is what forms the layers, which trap water at the bottom where it can be depleted of oxygen. If you can prevent that stratification, then quite simply, you're going to allow the lake to mix with the wind and the water to move more freely from top to bottom and horizontally. You're actually encouraging that movement, and you're making sure that there's always fresh water being come into contact with the atmosphere where that transfer can take place. It's a simple technology. From an energy input point of view, it's the cheapest and most efficient, I would argue. A simple quarter horse, 1 horsepower compressor might be all you need to power 5 or 6 of these diffusers. Another way to do it is the opposite, is to actually suck water from the bottom and shoot it to the top. Now, that's basically a fountain. There are lots of systems out there that do this. Some, like you see in this picture in the middle, have draw tubes that suck water up. Some even push water down. That's but we'll get to that next, I guess. Fountains in general, depending on the size and the type, will draw water from below them, some better than others, depending on the system. There was a long time, there was something called the Solar Bee on the market. They proved to not be very effective. And technology's gotten a lot better now, and it's much easier to install equipment that's more efficient than those. And then, of course, there's very uncommon method, which is top down. And I just flipped that picture up to be silly, but there are propellers and motors and things that do actually shoot water down from the top. They are uncommon. They're usually used in water tanks, storage tanks, and things like that. So what are some of the other objectives and benefits of these systems? Well, they're very similar to what the objectives would be for other systems too. One of the benefits of artificial circulation is the water movement. And moving water, as you can see here on the top bullet point, actually can kind of help affect the types of organisms that will inhabit that area. Certain organisms don't like moving water. Certain types of algae, certain types of plants, it's generally accepted that cyanobacteria, the things we often call harmful algae blooms or can become harmful algae blooms, generally don't like moving water. So lots of people will use circulators or fountains to try to limit their growth. One of the biggest benefits, and people I think often don't think about a lot, is by increasing oxygenated habitat, you're also allowing for the increase of other organisms like zooplankton, grazers, other small animals, microscopic animals that might help consume nutrients and help be part of the food web, become more food for other fish, as well as eating up other organisms. So having more oxygenation, more of an oxygenated habitat in different zones of the lake can really benefit the food web overall, not just be there for fish. We did talk here at the, what am I on the fourth bullet point here. I won't get into this too much, but generally, as I mentioned, oxygen reacts with lots of things in the environment, metals, mud, organic material. And so in those processes, you can reduce the amount of nutrients that are accumulating or recycling into your water body. And ultimately, the goal here with some of these artificial circulation tools is to really prevent algae. And so you can also even kind of encourage diatoms, for example, are a type of algae and certain green algae that like moving water better, or can at least adapt or have an advantage over less desirable species in an environment that has more flowing or more velocity in the water. This is an example of a project we manage here. And you can see here on the bottom a chart. The red and the orange lines at the top are the surface and the bottom temperature. And the bottom dark blue and light blue are the surface and bottom oxygen. And what we did is we used one of those bubbling artificial circulators. It's about a 20-foot deep lake or so. And we can see on the dashed vertical line, we turned on an aerator, and you can see the orange and yellow lines are different at first. They diverge, and that shows us there's a thermal or density variation. There's stratification occurred. When we turn on the aerator, you see that stratification disappears. We correctly mix the lake, preventing stratification. And you can see there shortly afterward, the oxygen levels homogenize, become uniform, and trend together, showing that this system was correctly or effectively mixing and stirring the lake. And it's a very cost-effective system. They can be tricky to design. You have to understand how much energy you need to put in through one of these diffusers, how much of an area it's going to affect. And that depends on the airflow. It depends on pressures. It depends on the depth of the water. Other characteristics as well need to be taken into consideration sometimes, such as the fetch or the wind direction and other things. And so some of these systems are great. And some systems, it's just not cost effective. You would need just far too many. For example, this would not be a good solution in Lake Elizabeth, where it's 88 acres and 4 feet deep. You would need one of these diffuser bubbler pods every 50 feet. You'd turn the whole place into a bathtub to do it successfully. But if you went to a very, very deep lake, well, those bubbles as they rise are creating large areas of impact and influencing much larger areas. And so I'm oversimplifying it a little, but understanding the dynamics of these systems and how to choose them is really necessary. Now, oxygenation systems that, as I talked about, like the soda stream device, like making a soda, those are usually much more expensive systems, and you really have to understand and do a lot of background research usually on a lake to understand how much oxygen it really needs, and sizing and choosing the right system for that purpose, and deciding, is this a lake that stratifies? Is that going to be a good thing for an oxygenation system, a bad thing? How deep is it? What is that oxygen demand? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? And is oxygen really the solution? There are a number of ways to achieve this, and I won't go into it too much. It's an entirely different presentation. But generally, as I mentioned, instead of mixing water or allowing for oxygen to just briefly come into contact with water, the objective here is we use some sort of pressurized system or some sort of technology that compresses gas in a chamber with water in order for it to dissolve. We have tried both of these technologies at Oakland, and we'll go into that a little bit next. These are some examples of pressurized systems, and I have to take one quick break real quick, and maybe I can pause and see if there's any questions, and I'll be right back in 1 minute. Please hold.
So I think we're all muted, and if you have a question, please put it into the chat, and let's see, I can then voice it to Eli. So let's see. Okay, so please type it into the chat if you have a question. I had one because I think you're about to get into this. About what have you found out about persistent stratification in Lake Merritt in the course of your work, and how do you think that is a major contributor to dissolved oxygen issues in Lake Merritt, if there in fact are serious oxygen issues that are going to need intervention? That's my question. But I'm looking for other people and I'm not seeing it. I apologize if you've asked. Somebody type a question.
Okay, I'm back.
Yay.
I will also like to quickly apologize to everybody because I've been up since 4 a.m. I had to get to a reservoir early this morning. I got home just in time to eat dinner and then jump on this call.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
So Eli, so most of these places you work are freshwater environments. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes, most of the places we do. We have worked in Fort Bragg in the harbor there, and we also do a lot of monitoring for the Hog Island Oyster Farm in Tamales Bay, and Belmarin Keys in Novato. We work up there. So we do. I guess we have more saltwater sites than I thought of, but yeah, mostly freshwater.
And I was, as someone who has done a lot of looking at Lake Merritt and stratification over the years. After all the study that you've done, do you still feel that stratification is a key driver of some dissolved oxygen problems in Lake Merritt, which, dissolved oxygen problems that may exist beyond the natural course of things in an urban estuary or in an estuary?
Yeah, great question. And I'm very excited to go there. That is like the next half of this talk.
Okay,
I'm ready to go there.
go.
Uh, are there any smaller questions maybe that Mike could answer quickly before about aeration systems or any of those fundamentals? Because that I would love. I'm ready to jump into that
Oh,
question.
we do have a question from Revital.
Okay.
She said, please explain how you select the location within Lake Merritt where the aerator should be placed.
Yeah, right. Fantastic point. There's going to be a couple ways to do that. So uh, initially, this project was done as an emergency project. So we didn't get a lot of time to sit around and study. Folks like Dr. Alex Horn, who's well known in the Bay Area, former Berkeley professor, and others were involved in this pilot. And we had a few logistical challenges, such as where we could get power. So, not very exciting justification for why to put something somewhere, but also depth is a pretty big issue. And another issue is the hydrodynamics, the flows, the water movement characteristics. So we chose the Glen Echo Park over there by what many refer to as the Green Monster, but most of you know it as Children's Fairyland. That area has low flow because of the shape and depths and contours of the bottom. It was somewhat isolated from tidal flows, more so than other parts in the lake. It also had power. It had exhibited a need. We felt that those conditions allowed to use an oxygenation system, one that dissolves gas in water. We thought that would be a good location because of the cost of those systems and the nature of how they work. We thought that location would be an ideal candidate, that it would allow the system to perform better, and that the conditions would result in a measurable impact. The other location we chose where we put in like your artificial circulator, the thing that looks like a fountain, that is kind of more of your traditional system. And that you choose that location again based on power. In that situation, you also choose it a little bit based on aesthetics. And then you also choose it based on depth and flows. And then, of course, is there a need for it in that location? So we chose the area by the pergola, lots of inflow, lots of storm water, tendency to have low oxygen, but also shallow, where that mixing energy would agitate below the fountain deep enough that it would make an impact on the potential for any sort of stratification. Stratification being thought as the cause for low oxygen issues. So those were the reasons. There's lots of other reasons on a larger scale study or a larger scale program, should one be adopted, where we would look at lots of other factors, potentially like areas that are prone to low oxygen to begin with. Maybe that might have to do with inflows or certain types of pollutants coming in. Some storm drains or locations might be better candidates than others. It might have to do with sediment conditions and characteristics that might result in more oxygen depletion occurring in certain areas versus other areas. It might just have to do with flow and water movement. So all of those factors would need to be understood a little bit better. But ultimately, in my opinion, any aeration is good aeration most of the time. And, sometimes striving for perfection can really just stop you from getting things done. And when it comes to things like artificial circulation, I think, I don't think there's really a way to get something exactly right. a lot of areas are going to be relatively equally beneficial in a lot of situations. Did that answer the question? Are there any others on that topic?
Yes, sorry. Anthony is asking about the effect of wildfires and smoke and how that might affect the oxygen conditions in the lake.
Well, there's some direct evidence.
Stratification, particularly, yeah.
Oh, and stratification?
Particularly, yeah.
Well, that I'd have to just speculate on that. I would want to research that topic a little more thoroughly. How wildfires would affect stratification. I think there could be direct and indirect impacts. I mean, obviously, fires create a lot of smoke, which can maybe diffuse light or possibly change some characteristics. But generally, stratification in a normal lake setting would really be just driven off of heat and sunlight and temperature. So I'm not sure. That's an interesting topic. If there's research you're alluding to about that, I'd love to actually see that link. As that'd be something interesting to study. Fire has become a hot topic in the last decade. The California Lake Management Society did a whole conference about it, but I don't recall anybody talking about stratification. Interesting idea, but usually the effects are indirect, such as increased runoff and landslides and mud and debris and increased inputs to lakes. There's also some research around how silt and soot and ash settling on lakes can change chemistry in lakes a little bit, and it's adding lots of carbon. There's some studies about nitrogen, I think, at one point. So there's some interesting stuff there too. Any other questions? Okay. Shall we talk about Lake Merritt oxygen?
Yes.
This graph starts all the way back at the beginning. As you can see, over time, we added more and more stations, more and more sensors. Every different color represents a sensor. There are 4 different locations, and each location has a top and a bottom sensor. They're all measuring oxygen. You can see on this chart, it goes all the way up to almost 30 at some points. That's very unusual. As you can see in the charts, it's very unusual. We generally treat 5 milligrams per liter or parts per million of oxygen as kind of the danger zone. And that number was settled on, I don't know, sometime in the 80s. And there's various justifications for it and ones that are still valid today. But I might argue it's somewhat arbitrary to a degree. It has to do with, animals being stressed for long-term exposure to low oxygen environments. True. 5 isn't bad when you're looking at things like oxygenation, oxygen behavior in the sediments and down at the bottom. Really, if you've got 2 or 3, that's great in my opinion. I see lakes below 5 all summer long. That's generally what you see. Stratification setting in a lake or in some setting or an estuary even, right? Stratification sets in, oxygen depletes and goes to 0. And that happens when? In the summer, when it's hot. The top water heats and warms. It rises as it gets less dense. That bottom cooler water stays trapped. You lose oxygen. I'd put to you, what do you see in this chart? The red horizontal dashed line represents 5, the danger zone. The zone at which you would say this lake is chronically bad dissolved oxygen. Again, when I look at lakes generally, I see temperatures go up in the summer, stratification set in. I see oxygen deplete in the warm summer months. go all the way to 0. This is every oxygen sensor in Lake Merritt for the last 3 years. The pattern is the opposite. I see oxygen going below the red do not cross line in winter. Do you all see that? To me, that's quite revealing. And we saw this early on. When we go in and zoom in, even all the way in the beginning, and I would look at the data when I first saw it. Every peak you see is the afternoon. Every dip you see is the evening. That's normal. Oxygen is generally created in lakes. Boy, I should have probably talked about this in the very beginning, by 2 processes. Oxygen goes up in the afternoon because oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis, and every primary producer like algae, plants, kelp, seaweed, they make oxygen as part of photosynthesis. So in the afternoons, you see oxygen going up. And in the evenings, generally, they respirate, they reverse their process, and they use the oxygen, and you see it go down. One of the things I saw really interesting in the very beginning was how oxygen dipped most often during rain events in the winter, and also on a day-to-day, oxygen also dipped with tide, more specifically with an outgoing tide. We saw that pattern routinely. We saw it at multiple stations. I don't have tides showing on this chart, but the pattern was unmistakable. Now, we didn't do any statistical analysis of that, but it was definitely something I brought to people's attention. Folks smarter than I have looked into that and started to look into it. And what we've seen here, to the point that you asked, the question you asked, Katie, is stratification a problem? Well, not traditionally, I would say. Remember I said stratification can be temperature, but it could also be salinity. In winter, we get the rains. We have a pretty short but quite robust rainy season usually, and we get large pulses of fresh water in through the watershed, through all of the storm drains that come into Lake Merritt, and we immediately see oxygen crash. And we see that first at the top, the surface of the lake, where that water comes rushing in. And then we see it a little bit later at the bottom. Fresh water coming in is less dense than salt water that's in the lake. And in a lot of situations, we see what we call a freshwater lens. And that's still a type of stratification. It's a short-lived stratification, but it is impactful. I see that resulting in low oxygen water coming in from the storm drain systems and stratification as a result of a freshwater lens. That is the stratification that would concern me about Lake Merritt. There's tides twice a day, 2 high tides and 2 low tides in a 24-hour period. Lake Merritt generally flushes and circulates quite well. We've actually seen over the course of our study that I think Lake Merritt is much more resilient and healthy than people give it credit for. It definitely has problems with trash, but the water quality itself is not as bad as people make it sound like. I have swam in Lake Merritt for work, though. I've gone diving in Lake Merritt before work when I dropped some equipment in the water. It was too expensive not to go diving for. I actually think that the 404D listing for oxygen in Lake Merritt isn't warranted. I'm probably not going to get any friends with that opinion. But I see that the cause of the low oxygen, as you see in this chart, is a winter problem. We have had dips in summers. We obviously have problems with DO crashing as a result of excessive nutrients causing algae blooms to go out of control, the other factors that may or may not have contributed to these different organisms blooming. Maybe that could be other external causes, nutrient spikes from wastewater treatment, changes in wet versus dry years, drought years versus wet years. There's lots of other factors that go into consideration when causing those phenomena that ultimately result in poor oxygen situations, but that's not the lake itself causing them. Sometimes it's the built environment around it, and those are solvable problems. Those are policy decisions sometimes that can solve those problems, but it's also, public works identifying those problems, identifying solutions such as flap gates on storm drains, preventing water from backing up underneath streets and storm drain systems, looking at other sorts of technologies that can reduce backflow into them, duckbills, gates, other sorts of structures, diversion tools, aeration and oxygenation systems strategically placed in areas that cause some of these effects from happening. So I think we've learned quite a bit. Ultimately, I'm just a lowly contractor, and the smarty pantses at the state will probably be the ones to to make the call in the end. But I've collected the data, I've come to my opinion, and I'm here to help. And if they ask my opinion and want my opinion, I'll give it. I just probably won't write a published paper about it. It's not my style. But I think the data was quite clear, and we're kind of coming to the end of this project now. It's been a lot of fun. I've spent every other week on Lake Merritt for the last 3 years. I've gotten to meet a lot of great people. I've gotten to learn a lot about aeration and oxygenation systems, how they work, how they don't, how rough salt water is on equipment, how much stuff grows on everything in a matter of 2 weeks, and what an abundance of stuff can grow. I mean, there's been some really fascinating stuff we've seen, and it's been a lot of fun. It's going to be sad. I still have 5 more months of my contract to finish up doing this monitoring and managing the aeration system, and it feels too soon. I hope there'll be opportunities to do more at Lake Merritt. I'm sure there will be, but this has been a fascinating project to learn about saltwater in a really, really deep dive, and to really experience it and to read about things and then actually see them happen in the real world. And we've gotten to bring a tremendous number of people to the lake and work with a lot of great organizations. I think a lot of people have learned a tremendous amount in this last couple of years, and it's been really eye-opening. And I hope the Nature Center friends have enjoyed getting the data, and I hope we'll find a way. The city finds a way to continue to do it.
So Eli, will this, I know there have been some summarizing of data by the Advanced Lake Restoration Committee. They published some reports, which I put a link to in the chat. And then upcoming on Tuesday, there's going to be a public meeting specifically about nitrogen sensing and yeah, that's gonna, and the new projects involved. And you had that really exciting video on LakeTech Facebook, which I tried to
Oh
share.
yeah,
Yeah. So uh, hopefully,
yeah.
yeah.
I think we're entering an interesting new phase now. We've It's been a long time, but we've been talking. The city has been talking with folks, these different San Francisco Estuary Institute, USGS, the state water board, regional water boards. It took a while for funding to get in place, but they've got some really interesting folks. Very impressive team of folks put together with varying sets of expertise. Um, and I think I'm excited to see what they come up with. I'm more excited to see things getting done. I love when folks can study things. I always just fear that you can overstudy things, and sometimes solutions are staring you in the face, and it doesn't hurt to start implementing some low cost effective tools right away while you still study the problem. And so as long as I'm looking forward to seeing their results, but I hope it doesn't stop them from doing some of the things that we've identified that need to get done too. I think we could walk and chew gum at the same time. I hope.
Okay. So did I hear you correctly that you think maybe that the 303D listing might be reasonably reviewed?
I mean, um, it is based on the
Almost 4
five
years.
milligram per liter
Mhm.
um, threshold often. And again, I mean, I'm sure there's other considerations that they take into that, but I've been really fortunate to have gotten into the game of real time monitoring of water quality, and I've got sensors all over the world now. I'm actually flying. I won't be at the meeting next week. I'll be in Fort Chipewyan, Canada, which requires a float plane in the northern part of Alberta. I've gone to New Zealand. I've gotten all across the country, and we have real time sensors everywhere we go. And I haven't met a lake that doesn't have low oxygen. If we were to start 303 listing, or these lakes, I think every lake around us would be on that list. I think if you start collecting the data at this level of frequency, um, you'd find that quite a lot of them end up on that list. But I don't think Lake Merritt's one of them.
Yeah. So, Eli, I know that you're going to need to leave, and I'm going to ask if it's okay to extend our Q&A time, and then I will
Yeah,
put in the closing slides at 8:15, if that's okay. After Eli needs
yeah,
to leave at
yeah.
that
I
time.
actually got lucky. I was able to rope in my mother-in-law to put my kids to bed tonight.
Oh. So we'll go
Thanks,
on.
Mimi.
Liv, so please put your questions. There was a question from Michelle about Lake Temescal, and I know you've done work there. Oh, and we have some other great questions. Um, yes, okay. I want to zoom up to a couple of them. One up here. With Michelle, she was asking about it says is a sag pond of the Hayward Fault and always has algae blooms. Why is it? Is it from the neighborhood runoff of fertilizers? Um, and then I think she said she meant she was
You
looking
talking
at
about? Was she talking about
Temescal.
Temescal? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anya, are you still on this call?
Yeah.
I bet she is. Anya. Anya Gray is an amazing lady. She's not even on the call, but she's still an amazing lady. Anya is my point of contact to manage that lake. Um, that lake is really more of I heard it described, and I couldn't agree more. It's a stormwater detention basin. Didn't start out that way. Started out as an 80-foot deep lake back in whatever it was, 1850 something. But now it's 15 feet deep. All you have to do is go there on a rainy day and watch the cloud of mud come through the creeks and come down from Caldecott storm drains to understand how quickly that lake is infilling. But there are also internal dynamics that take place where those nutrients come in and recycle. I'm happy to report that LakeTech partnered with the state and with East Bay Parks and others, and we found the most cost-effective product we could find, a safe product, which was a commodity product anybody can buy. It's used in drinking water facilities globally. And we were able to do these applications and drop the amount of nutrients down to levels the last 2 summers in a row so low that we actually had no harmful algae blooms to speak of. And the swim beaches, at least last year, I don't know what the number is to date this year, no closures to the swim beaches. And that was the first time in a decade that happened. And that took a lot of brain power and the right people getting together to identify the problem and to find a solution. And then the right team of regulators to allow us to implement that solution. And it was a smashing success. And I'm hoping that we can replicate that in a lot more places. We did it in Lake Anza. We've done it in a few other places. We're starting to work with the San Francisco Public Utility Commission, and we hope to roll out these solutions to a lot more places. It's cost effective. It's easy to do. It's safe. And nobody can patent it and own it and market it, that's a plus too. Anybody can do it, and that's really great. So Temescal's, I think, made a real great recovery. It's not without its ongoing problems, but it's another unique. Every lake is a special little snowflake.
So, Eli, we have some questions from Adrian. And he said, how do you look at the charts for just one station? And I think, I know how to do it on and I can share the dashboard. So you just click on, you can probably show us how to do that.
Yeah, I can show you here.
But
that's not something that's publicly available right now. I could talk with the folks at the city about that. Generally, what you see here this is what my chart looks like. It's kind of what I call the kitchen sink chart. And we don't usually put this public because it can be quite overwhelming for folks. And so generally we simplified the public portal, but this is available. We could make this available in varying ways. If you are at the, you can all see my screen right now, right, with this chart?
Yes.
You see I can hover over this one, surface and bottom. By the way, this website, I must give credit to my business partner, Greg. We built this entirely ourselves, and he's the main guy who does the coding. We've been doing it for pre-AI, which I almost regret. We could have just waited 6 years, and then now we just do it in a minute. But we spent a lot of time on this over the years. But you can see I can hover over the different sensors and look at different conditions, rain, air temperature, depth. Interesting to note here, they've got the tide gate closed again. Oh, it looks like that one turned off, possibly July 15th. I better fix that. If you go to that question, and Adrian, and you go to the public portal dashboard, I believe it's probably this one. Look at that; it's got a lot of views. One way you can
that's the one I look at.
Yeah, one way you can interact with this dashboard at the different stations here is you can turn them on and off.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that, so you can look at just station 1 by itself and zoom in there if you like. Or you can change it and look at station 2. So that's one way to do it. But we didn't provide any charts where we put multiple parameters on the same. We did include tides, but we did not include other parameters like temperature and salinity and things like that. Ultimately, we didn't want to. That data is available to the public, and through the proper channels. I myself would be happy to share that information with people as directed. Keeping in mind, there's the nature of this data. It's a lot of sensors. There's always problems with sensors. I've had problems from baby strollers, shopping carts getting wrapped up on anchors and damaging equipment, to weird critters growing on equipment. So the nature of this data is very provisional. And so one of the concerns I think about making it directly available to the public is the fear that data that's really just not been properly quality controlled, QC'd, and checked and tested might cause undue fear about the lake, when in fact it may just be dirty sensors or some sort of malfunction.
So probably we have another good question here from Adrian about, at the end of the project, will it be possible to get the data? And it seems likely that the dashboard will not be kept alive, the one that I just shared the link to, which you can which I go on multiple times a day. Is there any plan to make that available to people?
I can't speak on behalf of the city, but I'm sure they will make it available.
And I had another question, similar, kind of following up on that, if I could ask it, and that is...
I'll just mention,
I
will mention one thing real quick. If you are logged in, not logged in, but if you are on the water quality portal, I believe you should have this tool available to download the data right there yourself. If you want to do any other advanced work with that data, you could download it as a CSV. And that'll download it to your computer.
And can you choose a time frame for that, or you just have to get the whole thing?
Yes. Yeah, okay. You should be able to do that.
Correct. Okay. So one of the things we do at Rotary Nature Center, for instance, we have a handheld water testing device that tests the basic 5 water quality indicators. And I'm wondering if you, as you go out to maintain, do you ever use that kind of thing? Because a handheld is not going to be having problems with biofouling per se, and with accidents that happen with trash carts and rowers and who knows what else might happen to things, birds that might like it, your buoy. Do you ever back up or kind of do any parallel studying with handhelds?
We do, all of staff that we have handhelds with them. In fact, actually, the company we use, the brand of equipment we use, there's actually no difference between the handheld and the buoy one. Mm-hmm. It's just whether or not you connect it to an antenna. So it's actually the same equipment. And so that's actually what allows us to try to keep the data up and going as well as we do. It's a challenge. I was actually pleased out with some of the scientists recently, and they were saying it's not uncommon for them to just throw out a month of data. And so when I heard that, I thought, wow, I'm doing pretty good then. So in fact, they were saying in some places in the Bay Area, they've never gotten a month of good data from July in 7 years. So they just have gaps in their chart. So it's a challenge. It's always a challenge to QC data to decide, is this deletable data? Is this real data? We've been doing some pretty fun things where we have implemented some AI tools based on published papers and produced and published formulas to help us So we've started going back through some of our old data historically to clean and look for drift, look for calibration errors that occur sometimes, or other factors that can affect things that can affect even a handheld sensor, voltage issues, improper calibration issues, cleaning issues. So lots of factors can kind of produce funny results. And sometimes it's really hard to say. One of the benefits to Lake Merritt is when you're looking at your data and you're looking at this much data, you have the wealth of historical data at that location to help and decide, is this real? And you also have 4 other nearby stations or 3 other nearby stations that you can also say, is this what I'm seeing in other places too? So even with all of that, we have to use our judgment and sometimes be pretty conservative about what we clean or delete or mark as questionable. And so sometimes if you don't have a definitive way of considering a data point an outlier, you're stuck with it. So it could be, sometimes you just got to make a good judgment call, but kind of depends on the customer really. And what's the objective of the data, right? What are you trying to do with that data? In this situation, it's a cross between regulators now using it, but it was also for just public awareness. And so those also change kind of the level of rigor you take when QCing your data.
Great. Well, I want to encourage everybody who's interested in the fine-grained understanding of what the ecology and the metabolism of Lake Merritt is to think about coming to the meeting next Tuesday. There's a hybrid version, and it is on it will be on the Teams platform, where I think there will be a focus on but also on just looking back at all of what has been learned in the course of this study. I feel very happy that Lake Merritt has received so much close attention and is a really, with all this, as you say, background material and historical data, we'll be able to learn more and more as we go forward about our lake and how it may be changing under so many different influences, as you mentioned. Every year is different. Every location is different. So anyway, I hope that many of you will tune in, and again, you'll have an opportunity to ask some of the people there from water boards who are looking at the state and putting in some of the buoys. They're testing nutrients with grab samples, and now they're putting in a continuously sensing nitrate monitor, which really addresses a hypothesis that Lake Merritt is afflicted with a great deal of accumulated nutrients, and that's an ongoing
that's
area
going to
of
be
research.
Really interesting. The location they've put it, we've known nitrate specifically is an issue with wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of wastewater treatment plants in the Bay Area, some nearby. So that could be an external source. So hopefully that sensor picks up and can differentiate incoming and outgoing tide and answer that question as well. I'll just caveat that, though, that sensing nitrate with this particular instrument in saltwater is very challenging. So whether or not it's going to even produce data is a bit of a mystery right now. So we will see, because it's the Suna logger, Suna V2, SUNA V2 logger is, if I could explain how it actually works, I'd be a millionaire. But it's a very complicated piece of equipment. Wavelengths and how it's detecting nitrate at different levels in different environmental conditions, different salinities, different temperatures and densities. So it's going to be interesting. It might be the most. It could end up being the most frequent level of not detecting anything ever recorded in human history, or it could totally blow the top off of things. I'm really curious to see what happens. Either way.
So I know people have proposed some sediment testing, and this is going to be water testing above the sediment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I think sediment
approach
testing is interesting. I think understanding where hotspots might be present, like, sediment testing for things like oxygen demand, looking at the composition, just looking at physical characteristics could be even important. How they change, how they're distributed across the lake, and just smelling the sediment, looking at it, collecting it, even that alone, a rigorous study there could produce some really interesting results.
Well, I want to thank you so much, and really just goes to show that Lake Merritt is a very special lake, and it's really has deserved all of this scrutiny, and through that has become a place that we have found out more about a urban estuary than we have known in any other place, really. So really makes it an even more special location.
It's scary to think that I just realized people might be looking at this data for years to come. I better start doing a lot more QC, probably.
I'm sure you're a hero. You are always out there. Eli is always out there taking care of the sensors and just keeping an eye on things. So really appreciate all the work that you've done.
I got 2 skateboards out of the lake, actually. I plan to spray paint them gold and give them away as Christmas presents. Lake Merritt skateboards. True, authentic Lake Merritt skateboards. They don't work, but somebody appreciate
in the nation's first wildlife refuge. Yes. What else? Okay, I don't want to leave anybody behind on this.
No, I think we're good. It's a pleasure. I always enjoy coming and chatting with you guys.
We always enjoy you. You have so much to tell us. I really appreciate your coming and taking time in your very, very, very busy schedule to do this. Let's all give it up for Eli.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you guys too. Thank you guys.
Thank you so
Katie,
much.
There's nobody more dedicated than you. So everybody knows that.
We all. Thank you. So we'll let Eli get back. And thank you again. And I'm going to ask for your indulgence so that I can share our closing slides for just a moment. Yes. So here we go, people. And just take a moment here. Yes, thank you for coming. We hope to see you in September when we have another really exciting Lakeside chat lined up. We have special thanks to Eli, of course, LakeTech, the New Voices Are Rising externs that you haven't seen, but they've been busy all summer helping us out, testing the water and giving another point of view about what's going on. The Altamont Educational Advisory Board grant that we received, Alameda Countywide Clean Water Program grant, iNaturalist, taking a look at the whole ecology of the lake, Lake Merritt Boating Center, Lake Merritt Institute, Adopt a Spot people, Public Works, Measure DD, and all of Oakland. Okay, so next, if you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us with a donation. We're an all-volunteer organization, and we really can use some help sometimes with our website, our production of this Lakeside Chat. We've had challenges that have been met by our wonderful producer, Rob Lamone. Okay, we'd like to encourage people to sign up for the Urban Estuaries California Naturalist course that's going to happen starting on October 3rd through December 16th at Lake Merritt, venturing out into other interesting field trips to understand this special area of California. We have our programs rebroadcast every Sunday night from 6 to 7 p.m. on KTOP TV. You can tune in and see a selection of past programs on Sundays from 6 to 7. First 2 Sundays, selection. Last 2 Sundays will be the most recent Lakeside Chat. Coming up, on August 4th, need I mention again, there will be a public stakeholders meeting. So if you care about Lake Merritt and you want to know more about this complicated system, consider checking in. It can be hybrid, so you don't have to make it all the way down to City Hall. On September 11th, Andrew Alden is going to come and talk about 2 Oakland lakes, Lake Merritt and Lake Temescal. So that'll be a pleasure and always a wonderful talk. Lake Merritt, Rotary Nature Center Friends does plankton monitoring every week because we're interested in the plankton community that's involved in the decomposer loop and just seeing how it changes over time. We were testing the water this afternoon with some young people from the Team Oakland group, and I was able to share with them that 4 years ago, just a few weeks before the catastrophic fish kill, another group and tested the water, and we have their data. We can compare it with it, and it's really very similar. So we have community science data in our spreadsheets that go back a very long time to even before the fish kill. Biodiversity Day is coming. We'll have information on that. Creek to Bay Day is on September 19th. We will be having a station at the Sailboat House Beach, and also we'll be collecting iNaturalist information to keep track of the critters that are using Lake Merritt as their home. So we would love to see you on some of those. We consider ourselves primary stewards of Lake Merritt Wildlife Refuge, and we regularly host school groups, members of the general population at Lake Merritt for all of these activities. Yes. Wait, okay, that could be the end. Oh no, it is not the end. There we go. Special thanks to all of our volunteers and our staff members. We want to thank the Frederick E. Hart Foundation for educational opportunity that is a major contributor to the Lakeside Chat programs, and we are currently seeking some sponsorship for the Lakeside Chat programs. All of our volunteers and participants, I think I'm repeating myself here. Again, we do wish to thank all of our supporters and who have helped us out throughout the year. And keep in mind, Lakes Appreciation Month is July, and today's the last day, so enjoy that. Okay, I am going to stop my share and say thank you to all of you for coming. Hope to see you again in September. It should be a wonderful program. And in the future, we have some great programs lined up for you all the way through December and beyond, forming a little community of people interested in the lake and extensions of our curiosity about the lake and the world around us and about the people who live there. We care about them very much as well. So I think that's it. Unless anybody else would like to see. Yes, okay, so I want to say thank you to all of you. You've been a wonderful audience, and your questions are great, and hope to see you again next time. Thank you so much.